Welcome to the Coaching Life Podcast. I'm going to speak really fast because my partner Pat has to get out of here to a meeting in 35 minutes.
We've wasted so much time talking. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we have. For those of you that don't know, that listen to our podcast, we come in here, if we have a scheduled time, let's say from noon to 1 or noon to 2, 2 hours. Usually have a 2-hour time slot. We'll come in here, sit down, get everything all set up, and then
waste
chat. Without hitting record, we'll chat, or we'll go ahead and hit record, and then it's not really stuff that we want on the podcast, and so we actually have a and some of you guys are like, wow, for as long as your podcast is, we use the full 2 hours. So,
oh yeah.
You know what the average podcast length of time is? I'm learning all this stuff because I'm teaching that podcasting
You're a
course.
Professor now.
I'm not a professor.
Oh, you're Professor.
I'm instructing this course.
I'll always call you Professor from here on out.
Thank you. Yeah, boy.
I may do. When we greet at the coaches meeting at the home plate before the game, I'm going to call you Professor. Hey, Professor Stewart, how's it going?
I'll wear my glasses that day. The average
you're
length
teaching a podcast
in minutes.
Class.
I am.
Instructing.
It's Journalism 2230 survey of podcasting. So it's sort of a survey.
All this.
Yeah. People want to learn about podcasting and maybe possibly do it. Do a podcast of their own, or take our podcasting certificate here at Scripps.
Yep.
Then that's one of the required courses for that. The average length of a podcast.
I'm going to say 40. No, hold on. Let's see.
Think about it. Not the average of ours.
No, I got you. But I see a lot of podcasts out there that are only like 15, 20 minutes.
Yep. And then you have some that go a couple
3
hours.
hours, yeah.
Right?
Jocko.
But those are the ones that are making a lot of money, too. So they can handle that.
Yeah, they're just making a little bit more than we are. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you're right. I'm going to say 47 minutes.
38 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's between 35 and 42 minutes. And so it runs right around 38 minutes.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
I think that I like those. I like the I'll turn podcasts on at night when I go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So I like a long podcast for that. Yeah. But I do like those short podcasts when I'm just sitting around, need something to do, and you know, be able to. But most of the people that I talk to enjoy our longer podcasts more than our shorter ones. Wow. Because they most of them are
the drive time.
They're driving. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're driving when they listen to them. So.
If it's a half an hour to get to where you're going, you listen on the way, then finish it on the way back.
Yeah. Well, I know Chris Snoffer. Give him a plug.
There you go.
I think he drives to. Actually, I'm not sure where he drives, but his drive's about an hour, I think. So he's able to listen. Okay. I think he listens to us down, then listens to a different podcast with.
Well, today's show is only going to be able to listen to it down because you got to go here. And I might have to.
We're wasting time. What are we talking about today?
All right. Oh, by the way, one more quick little fact. Podcast fact. Do you know how much Joe Rogan charges for how much you have to spend for one ad if you want to advertise on his show? The minimum spend is $1 million.
Holy cow.
Yeah. He's the highest paid.
I'm trying to think what advertisements I've heard.
He gets paid the most of any podcaster out there as of right now. And he makes $30 million a year just doing his podcast. About 10 of that is from advertisement, and then he signed a $100 million contract with Spotify a couple years ago.
Wow.
I mean, multi-year contract. It comes up to about $30 million just in podcasting, and then of course he has other things that he does. I think he's worth $60 million or something like that a year. So it's crazy.
Confused why Spotify hasn't called us.
Yeah, I know. Oh,
way to go on that.
It's funny. I did do some searches for ours, where ours lands, like rank, because you can go to these different websites and search any podcast and see where it ranks in the world, how many downloads and things like that.
What are we like?
We're on there.
8,000.
You can find ours. You can find ours.
Are we worse than 8,000?
I don't know. And so, anyway, I thought of a topic and threw it out there to you, and it's one that we have not covered on this podcast ever. It's something that we have not ever talked about, and it's strange because for two reasons. One is because you and I both, it's relevant, very relevant to you and me both.
Sure.
And it's, I believe, very relevant to pretty much every youth sports team out there, especially baseball.
Even if they don't know it's relevant, it's relevant.
Well, right, and we'll tell them how it's relevant, whether it's personally relevant to you or not.
Right.
It is definitely relevant to all teams. almost all teams, I would say, and almost all coaches. And that's this. It's what the title of this podcast says: youth sports versus church.
Yeah.
It's a sensitive subject. It's a subject that you will have players on your team whose families go to church, and they are struggling with this very issue because of so many games and practices that conflict with days or nights that they attend church activities.
Right, usually Wednesday and Sunday mornings. Yeah, and I think it's important to understand, to touch upon the reason why, is that because there's a lot of people out there that just don't get, you miss church one day, so what, right? Mm-hmm. And not really understanding, the why that means so much to people and why it matters. I think it's important to kind of dive into that a little bit,
for sure.
As a Christian, as a person,
which you and I both are,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is our podcast, so we can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like you said, it's relevant regardless.
Yes.
And I've been on teams with people that didn't necessarily claim a certain faith or
absolutely.
So it's
most
not like,
teams, yeah.
This is a practical. How do you handle this situation? And talk about it from different perspectives.
For sure.
But for me, one, we're instructed to worship God
as often. Yeah.
Yeah. In a certain way.
Right.
So
to not forsake meeting with one another. That's an actual biblical passage.
Right.
That people struggle with. Their conscience hits them whenever they're choosing to miss the gathering.
Yes.
To go to a sports thing. And that's why it's a very real issue for a lot of people. And it's truly because in their minds, they're like, we say this is a priority and we say this is a commitment. And yet, and that's where the struggle, that's where the tension is.
Well, and I'll give another one, and I know you agree with this. As people of faith, when we go, we do these things that we're instructed to do, we get something out of it. And I think that's something else that, that isn't talked about enough. And it's written into the blueprint, right? That's one of the reasons that we're instructed to do it, because we're uplifted and we're encouraged, and we're around these people that love the same God that we do, the only God. And it's a blessing, so we get something out of that. And it's not just a matter of we're not doing something we're told to do.
Right.
We're not able to do something.
Not breaking a rule.
Yeah. It's not just that.
Yeah.
We want to do
because
it.
it's not a rule.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
And
Well, I think we get back to the
people need to understand that even the commands in the New Testament, they're not suggestions, they're commands, but even those are filled with grace.
Yes.
And so it's not like you can't miss to go to a game, right? And that's what we're going to try to balance in this conversation. And I've got a lot of personal experience in this, and I know you probably do as well. But you and I haven't even really actually talked about this much, and so we might learn something about each other in this today.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was a child, I can remember this struggle in my own parents' household. And I can remember listening to conversations, right, in the background of did you just fart?
No.
What was that?
That was my chair.
Okay.
Well,
we're going to grease these chairs down. We shouldn't have any chairs making noise in the podcast studio.
My shoe rubbed over the chair. That'll be interesting to see if that comes out on the video.
Yeah.
The audio.
Well, where was I?
You're talking about how your parents were talking about it in the house.
Yes, yeah. And I remember some of the struggle that they had was not necessarily their conscience about me missing church to go to a game or something like that, because it didn't happen all the time back then. We're talking about the 80s, and that just didn't happen as much.
Right.
But sometimes it did. And their philosophy about it was, we are Christians. We worship God the majority of the time of our year. That's what we're doing. That's where on Sundays, for example, on Wednesday, we go to as many things as we can, but we also are not going to force our child, both of our kids, Chris and Jared both, to have to miss the sports team's practice or their game to go to this, because it would be making it a rule and they're going to resent going to church, meaning that they're going to possibly resent God for for that because we know that they love this as well. We believe that we could raise our children in a way that they would love God and serve Him and enjoy the sport they play. And I'm really appreciative of my parents being able to do that. We got all kinds of stuff happening here. Something just hit. What hit?
I don't know if this means we should be talking about this.
Yeah,
or we
yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of. I have a lot of friends that are agnostic or atheists that started in church at a young age.
Yeah.
And it's kind of always been something that, I guess, interesting to me that a lot of those people.
It's sad.
Stepped away from their faith because of things like that, like
dogmatism.
One person even told me that they felt like their parents would basically disown them to maintain their relationship with God.
Wow.
And obviously, that's a failure. Yeah. That's a failure in God's eyes.
It is.
We have a responsibility to our kids.
Absolutely.
To raise them up in the right way and to take care of them.
And there's a real misguided understanding of what their relationship with God is and looks like if that's the way they went about it as well.
Right,
Let's be really honest.
Yes.
And so listen, I know that my parents received pressure, felt pressure, whether it was outward, external, actually given to them like in words, or whether it was hinted or manipulation. They felt pressure from the leadership in the church. I'm not going to call anybody out.
Back then.
But back then, it was a big deal. You don't miss church, right? And so that's the world I grew up in.
Yep.
And that's my original training in college was to be in ministry, and I served as a youth pastor for years, and moved back here for the purpose of planting a church. Some people may not even know that. Realize that's the whole reason April and I moved back here. Not the whole reason, but it's a big reason why we moved back here. Was we were praying about where to go to start a new church, and God led us back here. And when we began that church, one of the things that we both said is that our number one goal, of course, is to be biblical and to make sure that all of the essentials of Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, are priorities for this new church. But we also said, very simply, what kind of church do we want to plant? And my answer was, a church that I actually like, that I want to go to, right? That I want to be part of. A church that's not filled with rules that aren't necessary, So we've always had this, what we call open-handed and closed-handed, way of going about things. That in church, in any given, Christian organization, there are essentials. There are things that really, the Bible basically has some essential things. You got to believe these or you're not on our team, right?
Yep.
And those are a lot fewer than what people realize. The church has created a huge list of essentials, basically saying you can't be here if you don't believe this. And sometimes they're ridiculous, the things that they say, right? Singing a certain way, dressing a certain way, speaking a certain way, avoiding this, doing that, right? And there's a lot, they forget about grace. They created the Old Testament again. They gave us a bunch of laws.
Yeah.
And so what we said was, there are very few things in this. There are things in the closed hand. There is a separation, right? If you don't believe that Jesus Christ is God, you're not a Christian. You're not. And so that's a pretty big one. But over here in the open hand, there's a lot of stuff. And in that open hand is where you can miss a church service now and then.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. I think
there's no
speaking
rule
directly to those parents.
Yes.
And to the verse that you quoted about not forsaking
from the book of Hebrews.
Saints.
Yep.
I think the focus on that is the word forsake.
Yes.
Yes. And what does the word forsake mean? It doesn't. And that's not a miss. When you miss.
Right.
You're still drawn to something. You still long to find something. Forsake is on a completely different level.
You have walked away.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And we don't want to point fingers at this is from a Christian faith. For the parents that are struggling on those Sunday mornings to say, oh, what are we going to do? Are we going to let
our team won in pool play, and now we got to play Sunday morning at 9:00. in Columbus, 2 hours away or something. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we do? You're going to let somebody down. And here's the thing, and it's something that I've always had problems with too. When I've been in those situations, it was hard for my mind not to go to how is my kid's team going to feel when he doesn't show up, and why he doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Well, he's at church.
And listen, man, there are people out there who would say, Pat, that's a good thing. Your kid then is going to be able to stand up for Christ on his team and say why he wasn't there.
Tough, because you can stand up for Christ, but you got to have people listen to you.
That's a
and
great point.
Jesus was very good at getting people to listen to him, and how did he do it?
Yeah,
he loved them.
Yeah,
he was there for them.
Yeah, yep.
They could count on him. You know what I mean? So it's I agree. I want my kids in church on Sunday. But it's not, like you said, open hand. It's not just cut and dry.
Yeah.
There's other things to consider when you do that. And I think again, the danger of losing a kid because you're asking them to sacrifice something. You can't force people to sacrifice something for something they love. Mm-hmm. If you force them to sacrifice something for something they love, they don't love it.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Eventually, this became my choice. Right? Like when I was young, it was my parents' choice. Are we going to miss to go to this 12-year-old game?
Yes.
But then I get up to 16U, and my parents, good parents, as good parents do, they gradually allow you to start governing yourself.
Yep.
Right? We govern our kids, everything they do when they're young. But the whole goal of governing them and providing the boundaries for them, punishing them as well, giving them discipline, is that one day they'll be able to discipline themselves and make these tough choices themselves. So when I started having to make these tough choices myself, you know what I did? Sometimes I did miss a baseball practice for something that was more that was more important that I be there for, because it wasn't just I don't want to minimize what a church service is, but like maybe I had a responsibility or a role that the church was counting on me, and now my priority was, well, where would I be missed more? I would be missed more at church on this particular Wednesday night, and so I'm going to go. And so those were things that I had to work out in my own heart and mind as well as I got older.
I'm glad you said the word heart there, because I think we can quickly transition over to a coach's perspective on this.
Yep.
In that, how are you handling a kid that comes up to you and says, hey, I have to miss practice to go to church? And
this is where it's relevant to everybody. Because it's going to happen to you as a coach, whether you're a believer or not.
Yeah,
you got to consider this.
It's tough. And I would say that I have always, of course, my background and my disposition, lends me, but it's not just because of that. Because all I'm going to say, I've always been open to allowing kids to come to me and say, I'm going to miss a game or practice because I have church. And I would never make them feel bad about that.
Right.
Okay. Not just because I'm a Christian, not just because I think it's important for them to do that.
I wouldn't make them feel bad about it if they communicated it up front and it gave me time to prepare as a coach. If I thought they were going to be there and all of a sudden, like because they're always there, or because maybe they did miss church a couple of times, and all of a sudden on this particular weekend they say to me, "Oh, I'm not going to be there tomorrow," I'd be like, whoa, where'd this come from?
Right.
Why didn't you talk? I would be a little upset in that.
But that doesn't have anything to do about going to church.
Exactly.
Right? That has to do about them being
learning how to communicate properly.
Mature individual and communicate properly. And the same way, like from a coaching perspective, I want them to know that I support them as people, right? I support their faith so that they would trust me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They buy in.
As a coach.
I am supporting you. I've told kids, in off season, I think there's more leeway in the off season than there is in season, but still it's still a conversation. It's not, every case is different, but I've told kids in the off season, we've had off season practices and things like that. I've told kids to go do, ride a dirt bike.
Yeah.
If you want to go ride a dirt bike Wednesday, instead of coming to practice, you're going to come to practice Thursday and Friday, go ahead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I feel like that improves our relationship.
Right.
They can look at me and say, this guy cares about how I feel, what I want, where I am.
Listen, it happens with me sometimes. Was it during the season? And it's happened with me a couple times with hunting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Hey, Coach, my dad and I have this trip that we take every year. It did happen to me during the season last year. It was early.
Well, spring sports always is kind of, it's hunting. It's, vacation. People take early vacations in spring sports, seems like all the time. And then there's all these other
spring
things
break.
that they do.
They go on vacations during that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're always taking hits like this. We got to deal with this kind of stuff. And we typically deal with it differently than fall and winter sports because we have to deal with it.
It's just part of it.
Yeah, right.
With our sport, right? Well, I got to a point so our church had been in existence for a while, and then my kids grew up to where they're now playing travel. So like Brock's 12 years old. Thinking back to when he was 12 years old, he's playing travel ball, and we're in that situation where we're playing on Championship Sunday.
Yep.
And I'm not only a parent of a kid on the team who also goes to church, but I'm also the coach or a coach on that team, the head coach, but we had other staff, and I'm the pastor of the church.
You have a sermon. Yeah, you're
right?
planning a sermon.
Right.
You're responsible for the sermon.
And so proactively, what I did and our church is so great. That sounded really weird to say it like that, but our people are such
I knew what you meant because I've been there.
Great people, where we have always verbalized who we are as a church is really kind of in this way. We desire to be the church more than just go to church, right? The church isn't a building. It's not a program. It's who you are. And so when you understand that, you realize that wherever we are to be someone. You can't be a church just you by yourself, because by very nature of the word, it's community, right?
Right. That goes into the forsake, when there's that thought process of, well, I can worship God in the world.
Yeah. Right. But the idea is wherever we happen to be, let's create church there.
Right.
And we literally did that. One of the coolest memories that I will always have as a person is during Brock's 11U year was the first year that we started doing travel ball. And really, travel ball was the only kind of ball that you played on Sunday all the time. I mean, in the mid 2000s at least. I mean, maybe everybody does now, but back then it was pretty uncommon until you get to travel circles. All of a sudden, the club ball, you're always playing on Sunday.
I know in our area, the rec league usually starts 1 o'clock or later.
Yeah,
so
but it's nothing to have to play at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday all the way through, right? Now, and so we did two things. One, we hosted a tournament here in Athens, and this is where it began. We felt like the other coaches on my staff, we had myself and another guy. We were both Christians, and we had Christian coaches on the staff. We had a handful of people, probably I'd say 6 out of the 5. Let's go with a lower number, like 5 out of the 12 players we had on that team were church-going people. Okay, and so we're like, man, it just feels funny to, that we're actually organizing a tournament. It's not just we're in a tournament; we're organizing a tournament, and we're making people miss church, right? Because we felt guilty about it.
Yep.
And so Chris and I said, this Chris Coswell, who I'm talking about, which ironically enough, Chris and Sean are now part of our church. And he's always not always been a Christian, but he's been a Christian for a long time. He's the guy I'm talking with. And we're like, you know what? Why don't we have a church service here at the park? I'm like, awesome. I'm like, I said, let's do that. I'll lead it. Chris is like, I'll take care of communion. I'm like, sounds good. So just the two of us, and we advertised it as part of the tournament advertising. We said on Sunday morning, we realize this is an issue. It's an issue for probably every team that's in the tournament. Somebody's going to run into this. And so we want to open it up to anybody that wants to come. It's going to be under the back shelter house beside Jacobs Field. It's going to start at 7 a.m. because our first games start at 8, and it's not going to be long. It'll be no more than 15 minutes, so your kids will have plenty of time to warm up if you are that 8 o'clock game. But regardless of when you play, you're welcome to come. And we thought we'd have, those 5 families from our church, from our team come, plus maybe a handful of others. This was awesome. Every family from our team came, even the ones who wouldn't have been in church anyway that morning. Every single one, all 12 families from our team came. Maybe just to support, us in it or what, I don't know. But that shelter house was packed.
That's awesome.
It was packed with people, kids in uniforms and everything. And so we bounced off of that, and we continued what we called that summer, and we ended up doing it every summer after that, baseball church. And so my church, on the church end of things, my church knew, hey, these are dates that I'm going to be away. Like, I don't take vacations any other time during the year, but in the summertime, I'm probably going to miss 4 or 5 Sundays, which is normal for pastors to miss that many in a year, right? But they're all going to be during the months of June and July. And so we had other people in our church teach that day, right?
Sure.
Or you. We had people like you come in and teach, and guest preachers or whatever. And our church didn't bat it. But for the most part, there's always going to be people who don't like it, But for the most part, the people who, I don't want to say the people who mattered, but the leadership and the people who were regular part of our church, who understood our church family, they're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's fine. And I, one of our things that we don't like. I'm really careful about how I talk to somebody after they miss a Sunday.
you have to be, because they're feeling awkward coming in.
Yes. Anyway. And how it feels to have a preacher come up and shake your hand and say, missed you last week. You know what's behind that. It's like, you shouldn't miss Sunday. That's what's behind. It's a manipulative, hint dropping bull crap is what it is. I'm going to be really honest with you. Don't do that. Don't do that to people. If you're a preacher, don't do that to people.
That's good training. But I don't know that every preacher means that. Or means
of course
that,
not.
That's how it comes out.
Right. Yeah, I should have at least qualified it with that. We're not saying you all mean that.
But they could take it that way.
Some of them do. Some of them do.
Well, and some of them are a lot more blunt than that.
Yeah. But, and so I try to be careful about, and so anyway, our people know we're not going to give you a guilt trip if you have to miss. We have people in our church right now who are involved in like competitive cheer, right? Your cheerleading coach at Meg's. Okay, they miss a lot of church for that. They've never felt guilt. I hope not. Melissa, if you listen to our podcast, I hope if you've ever felt guilt coming from me to you, forgive me. I apologize, because I've never met, and they wouldn't feel that way because I've done the same thing.
If you do, Melissa, I've got a church you can go to. You can get away from Chris.
Yeah, but they'll make you feel guilty down there. Justin.
No.
Justin's we've had Justin on our podcast. One of our best episodes was Justin Roush.
Yeah.
Your pastor.
Yeah. Good guy.
And he is. But no, I tell you, man, all summer long, what we would do is we'd meet like in the Dunham's parking lot if we were going over to Marietta, or we'd meet at the Wayne National Forest if we were going to Columbus. And depending on what time we had to play on Sunday, it changed what time we would meet. And we would say, hey, if you want to do church with us, this is what time church is. And then from there, we'll carpool up. But otherwise, you need to be at the field by this time.
Yep.
And it was so cool because everybody came. And we would put communion out on the hood of the car and stand around there. And I would give a little devotional. And I would ask if anybody had anything they want us to pray about. And the kids would sometimes have prayer requests. Their parents sometimes would have prayer requests. And we would just stand around and we'd pray. And then after prayer, everybody would go and grab their little communion packet, the little peel-off thing where you take the wafer and the juice, and they would go off and stand by themselves when they were ready, take the communion, and then when that was done, we'd get a little break, and like a baseball break, right? And sometimes that break would be like based on the little sermon from that day, the little 10-minute message that day or whatever, something, joy, boom.
That's really
1, 2, 3,
cool.
joy.
We should probably try to start marketing that idea some way. I think it could really catch on with a lot of places. We say
it filled a void. It filled a void for a lot of people.
There's no doubt, and
the guilt went away.
For our family, we've done well. And one thing that the COVID pandemic came, there were some good things.
We had to be creative at that point.
We had to find ways, right? Mm-hmm. And remote church service became a thing. And now, our church continues to stream our services.
We do too.
Have you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do. I see them on Facebook every week. But our family have done that just, as a family, taking our communion cups with us and things like that. And, I'd prepare a short message and we'd pray, we'd sing some songs.
Yeah.
We do
just
the essentials that you're talking about, because, we talk about being led by the example of the New Testament church. That's what these people did. I mean, They didn't have a church building in most cases.
Wherever they were, they just
they were traveling around, carrying the word with them, spreading the word. And on Sunday when it was when the
first day of the week,
that it was time to worship God, they worshiped God with whoever was with them and together. So I think it's a great example you set there, and it's a proof. It's proof that as Christian parents, as Christian families, not only can we still worship God on these these moments that we're not able to make it to church for some other reason, but we can still give testimony to God, and we can provide other people that opportunity too. Yeah. So great idea for people that are struggling with that.
Listen, man, I had one dad who's a good friend of mine come up to me. I don't know, after a few times of doing that, and he actually said, "Man, I've never even thought about going to church. Like, I wasn't raised in church or anything." But he's like, I can tell this feels right.
Well, Coach, really, that is the blueprint as well. Us going out into the world, and taking that message with us. I mean, there's no better way to do that. When we it's just an opportunity. This problem that we got a problem.
Right.
We got baseball tomorrow.
And there are ways to deal with it, right? You could say, well, sorry, you could tell all the organizations of the tournaments that you went into. Basically, you could say, listen, son, daughter, because it's a softball issue as well, volleyball as well. You could tell your kids, you could play baseball, you could play volleyball, softball, but you can't play on any of these competitive teams. This is what you're limited to, because we're Christians and we don't miss for any reason at all.
Sure.
And then you have it, like on that team that we had. If I had 5 families out of 12 kids, if they all held the hard line and say we couldn't play on Sunday, our team would have to forfeit in the tournament play every Sunday, every week.
And the problem you run into is because you're not going to get that same commitment out of the other teams. Because if every team would do it, guess what would happen?
It might change the system.
They would stop having games on Sunday mornings.
Yep. And for those of you that run tournament organizations out there, and you choose to play at 1:00 to begin your competition play. I know it runs later in the day, but how many tournaments have I been to where there were 100 and some teams and that thing was done by 4:00 in the afternoon?
Right.
And it's summertime. Sunlight goes until 9:00 in summertime.
Yep.
And we just want to get out of there quick. Mm-hmm. So we have to start at 8:00 in the morning.
But it's just a mindset. It's just a habit. That's all that is.
Right.
Yeah, I would encourage those, the administrators of our leagues and our tournaments to just,
it doesn't have to be done that way.
It doesn't have to be. Just think about, how can you better, and maybe you do. Maybe you advertise, hey, there's going to be this area over here during our tournament that you can set up and have a church service.
Gives me an idea.
Yeah.
Our plan is to run one of our fundraisers this year for our Eastern high school baseball team is to run a 12U tournament. We would like to do 12 and 10 using Tuppers Plains fields and our softball field at the high school as like the showcase field. But we're not going to be too ambitious. We're going to at least start with 12U. And that's an idea, to actually advertise. You will not play during church time.
Yeah.
We will, on Sunday, we'll start. The first game won't start until 1 or whatever it is. Or if we look at the schedule and we're like, there's no way to do this without running in darkness or having to go into Monday, which you can't really do that either. It's not ideal to do that unless people are off work every Monday. Or, like you said, advertise. For those of you who are believers, churchgoers, you want to have a church service, we will have that.
Yeah.
We'll offer that here at this field.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Plan that, Dustin. You're on that. Dustin's planning the church service.
As soon as you said 12, that's it. Yeah. I'll be there. I want to hear this one. Hear this sermon. It's good. It's good stuff, Coach. Yeah. I like that you guys are thinking about doing a 12U tournament for...
It's going to be a challenge to find a time, a date to do it. Like, ideally, I'd like to do it shortly after our high school seasons, like early June, before some of the, or as one of the first weekends of tournament play, as opposed to later in the, because I'll be able to get a lot more volunteers a little easier that way.
Yeah.
Kids won't be in this. Like, when I talk about volunteers, I'm talking about our own players.
Right.
But But I mean, there are a lot of places that run tournaments. I mean, nearby, Marietta, Wellston,
No, I don't.
Gloucester.
You'll have teams.
But I mean,
they'll come.
so
You build it, they'll come.
I want to do my best to not double, excuse me, to not double up where somebody within a 50-mile radius is running a tournament as well.
It won't matter. They'll get their teams. You'll get your teams.
That's probably true.
People are thirsty for baseball.
That's right.
They're going to hell to play baseball on Sundays. Just kidding, folks. Just kidding.
Hey, yeah, listen. The Church of Jesus Christ is a strange world sometimes. There are people out there who are well-meaning people and go to church that probably believe that, Pat.
Yeah.
It's sad to me because it's not biblically true. And if anybody wants to debate on that, I would love to sit and debate with you on that with our Bibles open. But
well, if that's it, I don't got a shot. You know what I'm saying?
Me either.
If that's it, I don't have a shot. So
yeah,
hopefully return to that idea of grace that you mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. Very thankful for because I don't deserve it.
You got 1 minute to spare. Any last words?
Talk to you next week.
There you go. Thank you all for listening. As always, please share our podcast with others. And if you get a chance, rate it. Like if you listen on Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, because I've learned that on Apple Podcasts, any kind of rating goes a long way.
Unless you're going to rate it low.
Pat, I've had people do a Google search, like on their own computers, like one of my students out here, for the Coaching Life podcast, so that like the algorithm wasn't like mine, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And our podcast showed, like when they did the Coaching Life podcast, just in their search bar, ours was, I think, the second or third option that showed up on the Google search.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's consistency.
Keep listening.
Stay consistent.
We're trying. We're doing a little better.
All right. Sorry, you better log into your meeting. Thanks, everybody.
See you, everyone.